They don't belong in my establishment, Chef Julian snarled, his glare fixed on the elegant black couple at his best table. Get them out. Now. The dining room hushed, the fuse of his career officially lit. Chef Julian Croft commanded the gleaming, brass-accented open kitchen of the Gilded Compass like a tyrannical maestro. From his post, he surveyed the dining room, a space of cool, modern luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panorama of the city skyline. His flagship restaurant, the crown jewel of the Aurelia Culinary Group, was his kingdom, and his word was law. Tonight, the tension was palpable. A whisper of a visit from a major food critic had the staff moving with a strained, anxious precision. Clara, these wine glasses have streaks. Polish them again until you can see your own disappointment in the reflection. He barked, his voice cutting through the clatter. And tell the bar the ice for the cocktails is melting too quickly. I want perfect cubes, not sad little puddles. His perfectionism was a weapon, and he wielded it without mercy. The hostess, Clara, approached him, her steps hesitant. Chef, a couple just arrived without a reservation. They're asking for a table. Julian's eyes flicked toward the entrance. A black couple, both around 40, stood with an air of quiet confidence. The woman, poised and elegant in a simple but exquisitely cut silk dress, wore a discreet, vintage timepiece on her wrist that spoke of inherited taste rather than new money. The man, in a bespoke suit that fit him like a second skin, projected an aura of unshakable calm. Something about their self-assured presence immediately irritated Julian. We're fully booked, he declared, a lie easily disproven by the half-dozen empty tables dotting the room. But chef, Clara started, gesturing subtly, we have 3 available 4 tops, and they seem. I said we're booked. Julian cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. Those tables are held for regulars. People who appreciate what we do here. Clara retreated, only to return a moment later, her expression even more troubled. Sir, they're insisting. They said they'd be happy to wait, but they'd like to speak with the manager on duty. Julian let out an exaggerated sigh. Of course they are. The entitlement. He wiped his hands on his apron and strode toward the entrance, a mask of professional courtesy failing to hide his disdain. At the front, Marcus and Dr. Lena Thorne exchanged a knowing look. 3 weeks into their marriage, this was the 12th incognito visit in their systematic review of the 58 restaurants in their portfolio. The goal was simple: experience their establishments as any customer would. No reservations, no announcements. Ready for this? Marcus murmured, giving Lena's hand a gentle squeeze. She nodded, her antique watch catching the dim light. Let's see what the Gilded Compass is really made of. Julian arrived, his eyes scanning them with a practiced, dismissive appraisal. Good evening. I'm Chef Croft. I understand there's an issue. His tone implied they were the issue. No issue at all, Lena replied, her voice smooth and measured. We were just hoping for that lovely empty table by the window. The one you were holding for the food critic who canceled his reservation 30 minutes ago. Julian's smile froze. A cold knot of suspicion tightened in his gut. How could they possibly know that? He recovered quickly. I'm afraid that table is reserved for another party, he lied smoothly. However, I can seat you over here. He gestured to a small, undesirable table tucked away near the swinging kitchen doors, where the noise and traffic were constant. Marcus and Lena glanced at each other, then followed without a word of protest, their quiet compliance only fueling Julian's irritation. From his vantage point in the kitchen, Julian watched the Thornes with a growing sense of unease. They didn't behave like typical customers. Marcus studied the extensive wine list not with confusion, but with the focused eye of a connoisseur, his finger tracing vintages and regions with a familiarity that unnerved Julian. Lena, meanwhile, examined the menu with an analytical gaze, whispering observations to her husband about the layout and ingredient sourcing. Their server, a young man named Alex, approached the kitchen with their order, looking impressed. They've ordered the 8-course tasting menu with the prestige wine pairings, he reported. The gentleman asked why we switched our Burgundy supplier, and the lady inquired about the original inspiration for your signature scallop dish. Julian scoffed, trying to act sophisticated. They probably Googled us in the car. It's their entire month's salary on one dinner. His sous chef, Leo, a talented and empathetic young cook, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. When Marcus sent a request to speak with the chef about a specific wine pairing, Julian, in a petty assertion of dominance, sent the sommelier instead. The sommelier returned minutes later, looking flustered. "Chef, they're unusually knowledgeable. The gentleman corrected me on the vintage of our Bordeaux, and the woman asked why we modified the original recipe for the citrus fennel puree. She said the original had a more robust, earthy note." Paranoia began to creep in. Were they rival restaurateurs? Undercover critics from a new publication? He decided to deliver their main course himself, to size them up. He watched as Leo put the finishing touches on their plates of pan-seared scallops, adding an artistic swirl of saffron foam and a sprinkle of micro-herbs. Touches reserved for VIPs. "What are you doing?" Julian snapped, pulling the plates away. "Just elevating the presentation, chef," Leo replied, confused. "Not for them." Julian took a spoon and crudely smeared the standard sauce over Leo's delicate foam, obliterating the artistry. They get the regular version. At their table, the Thorns immediately noticed the stark difference between their plates and the beautifully presented ones arriving at adjacent tables. They said nothing, but Lena discreetly took a photo with her phone. Julian hovered over them mid-meal, his hostility barely veiled. "Is everything to your liking?" "The concept is strong," Marcus replied with diplomatic precision, though the execution seems inconsistent with the brand's promise. Julian's face flushed with anger. "Brand promise? I've been the soul of this kitchen for 8 years. I am the brand." "Interesting," Lena said, making a note on her phone. Julian noticed she had barely touched her wine, a premier Grand Cru he had personally selected for the pairing. "An opportunity. Not to your taste?" he asked with a condescending smirk. "Perhaps something less complex would suit your palate. I could recommend a very nice Moscato." The insult, sharp and targeted, hung in the air. Several nearby diners shifted uncomfortably. Lena calmly placed her napkin on the table. "Are you suggesting we don't belong here, chef?" Julian leaned in, his voice low and venomous. "I'm suggesting you might be more comfortable elsewhere. Perhaps that popular barbecue joint downtown? I hear it's very lively." The restaurant had fallen silent. Marcus's expression was a mask of neutrality, but his eyes were like chips of ice. He stood slowly, helping Lena with her chair. "I believe you're right," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We will be going." He reached into his jacket. "No need to make a scene," Julian interrupted, assuming he was reaching for a wallet. "The meal is on the house. Just go." The Thorns walked out with their heads held high. Through the window, Julian watched them get into a sleek, futuristic sedan and immediately make a phone call, their faces grim. He felt a surge of triumphant satisfaction. He had protected the sanctity of his kingdom. Inside the silent, opulent cabin of their lucid heir, Lena's composure finally cracked. Her hands trembled, not with hurt, but with a tightly coiled rage. 8 years, she whispered, her voice quivering with indignation. 8 years we've spent building this company, and that is how he treats people who look like us. In our own restaurant. She took a deep, steadying breath. "I developed that scallop recipe, Marcus, in my grandmother's kitchen. He's taking credit for my family's history and using it to insult us." Marcus took her hand, his thumb stroking the cool metal of her antique watch, a silent reminder of their partnership. "This is exactly why we're doing this, Lena. The Westlake location has had whispers of complaints for months, but nothing concrete. Nothing we could act on. Well, we have it now," Lena said, her voice hardening into steel. She retrieved her corporate phone from her purse, a different device from the one she'd used inside. As Chief Operations Officer of Aurelia Culinary Group, she rarely pulled rank. Tonight was an exception. "I'm calling HR. I want a full incident report started immediately." The call was answered on the first ring. "Rebecca, it's Lena Thorne. We have a code red situation at the Gilded Compass." She recounted the evening's events with cold, clinical precision, her emotions locked away behind a wall of executive resolve. and I want the regional director on site within the hour. Meanwhile, Marcus, as CEO and founder, made his own call to their chief legal counsel. Martin, it's Marcus. We have a major liability issue brewing at Westlake. He outlined the incident, not with anger, but with strategic clarity. No, don't shut them down yet. I need this handled systematically. This isn't about punishing one man. It's about fixing the institutional culture that allowed him to thrive. Inside the restaurant, Julian swaggered back into the kitchen, a smug grin on his face. And that, he announced to the silent staff, is how you handle troublemakers. He noticed Clara, the hostess, looking distressed. What is it now? He demanded. Chef, the phone has been ringing off the hook. It's someone from corporate headquarters. They say it's urgent. Take a message. Julian shrugged, dismissing her. We're in the middle of service. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. It was his friend, the head chef at another Aurelia location. Julian, what the hell did you do? His friend hissed. Corporate just sent out a priority 1 email. They're calling an emergency meeting of all regional directors. Something about a critical incident at your location. A flicker of unease finally penetrated Julian's arrogance. Before he could process it, the kitchen doors swung open with force. Isabella Rossi, the regional director, stood there, her tailored suit and severe expression radiating an authority that instantly silenced the room. Isabella, Julian began, forcing a casual smile. What a surprise. She ignored him completely, her eyes sweeping across the kitchen. I need to speak with every staff member who interacted with the Thorne couple tonight, she announced, her voice leaving no room for debate. And I need access to all security footage from the last 3 hours. Now, Isabella Rossi set up a command post in Julian's own office, transforming his personal sanctuary into an interrogation room. One by one, she interviewed the staff, her questioning precise and unflinching. Julian paced outside, his earlier bravado curdling into anxiety. He saw Leo, his sous chef, emerge from the office, his face a mixture of relief and resolve. He had shown Isabella the screenshots of past text messages, complaint from Julian about certain types of customers, instructions to give preferential treatment, and derogatory comments about staff. The betrayal stung, but the fear was worse. Julian's personal phone buzzed. It was an anonymous text. Chef Croft, your actions between 2015 and 2047 have been recorded. Regional Director is on site. Do not leave the premises. The specificity of the timestamp sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't a bluff. He tried to control the narrative, approaching Isabella as she finished interviewing a server. Look, this is all a misunderstanding, he began, his voice slick with false sincerity. Those people were disruptive. I was protecting the restaurant's high-end image. High-end image, Isabella repeated, her voice dangerously low. By insulting guests based on their race. I would never. I didn't know who they were. Julian sputtered. That's exactly the problem. Julian, she retorted, her gaze like ice. Your conduct shouldn't depend on a guest's status. It should be consistently respectful. That is the Aurelia standard. Her phone rang. She answered, her expression shifting as she listened. Yes, sir. He's right here. I understand. We will proceed as discussed. She hung up and turned to Julian, her face grim. That was Marcus Thorne. He and Dr. Thorne are on their way back. They're bringing the company's legal team with them. Panic, cold and absolute, seized Julian. He stumbled back into his office, the one place he still felt in control, and slammed the door. His hands trembled as he collapsed into his chair and opened his laptop. With a sense of dread, he typed Marcus and Lena Thorne Aurelia into the internal company search bar. His blood ran cold. The screen filled with their official corporate profiles. Staring back at him was the man he had just ejected. Marcus Thorne, CEO and founder, Aurelia Culinary Group. Beside him was the woman whose palate he had insulted. Dr. Lena Thorne, Chief Operations Officer and Head of Culinary Development. He clicked on a link to a recent feature in Fortune magazine. The headline read, The Gold Standard, How the Thornes Built a Dining Empire on Data and Dignity. The article detailed their journey from a single restaurant funded by their life savings to a national powerhouse. It celebrated their recent marriage and their shared vision. Then he saw it, a paragraph detailing Dr. Thorne's culinary philosophy, specifically mentioning her signature pan-seared scallop recipe, a dish inspired by her grandmother's cooking in Ohio, the very recipe Julian had claimed as his own masterpiece, born from a mythical trip to Normandy. The foundation of his career, his reputation, his identity as a chef, crumbled into dust in the sterile glow of the laptop screen. Julian emerged from his office, his face the color of ash. The main dining room was being systematically and quietly emptied. Isabella stood at the center, directing the staff with practiced authority. "We're closing for the evening," she announced to the remaining guests. "Your meal is complimentary, and you will receive a gift card for the inconvenience. We apologize for the disruption." "You can't close my restaurant," Julian protested, his voice a pathetic crack. "It's not your restaurant, Julian," Isabella corrected him, her tone final. "And yes, I can." He watched, helpless, as his kingdom was dismantled. Staff members he had terrorized for years now refused to meet his gaze. He tried his key fob on the back office security pad. The light flashed red. Access denied. He was a prisoner in a palace that was no longer his. The front doors swung open. Marcus and Lena Thorne entered, but they were not the same people who had left an hour earlier. Gone were the quiet, unassuming guests. In their place stood two titans of industry, radiating an aura of absolute power. They were flanked by a team of sharp-suited lawyers and data analysts, their faces grim and purposeful. Julian stepped forward, a desperate, placating smile plastered on his face. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, Thorne, there has been a terrible misunderstanding." "That's Dr. Thorne," Lena corrected him, her voice cold as a glacier. "And Mr. Thorne." "And no, Julian, there is no misunderstanding. We have footage from 5 different camera angles, audio recordings, and sworn statement from your staff." Marcus addressed the assembled employees, his voice calm but resonant with authority. "For those who don't know us, I'm Marcus Thorne, the founder of this company. My wife, Dr. Lena Thorne, is our COO and the creative force behind our menus." Lena's gaze swept over the room before landing on Julian, pinning him in place. Tonight was supposed to be a standard quality check. Instead, it became a diagnosis of a sickness within our own company. A sickness that stops tonight. A lawyer began distributing non-disclosure agreements. "This is now an active legal and HR investigation," she stated flatly. "I had no idea who you were," Julian pleaded, his last line of defense. "If I had known, that is precisely the point." Marcus cut him off, his voice unyielding. "Our company's values of respect and dignity are not reserved for people you think are important. They are for everyone. Period." Julian's authority had not just evaporated, it had been inverted. The staff he once ruled over now stood as witnesses for the prosecution. As he stood there, stripped of his power, Lena stepped closer, her voice dangerously quiet but audible to everyone in the silent room. "By the way, Chef Croft, the scallop recipe. You claimed your inspiration came from a trip to Normandy." Julian stared, speechless. "That's fascinating," Lena continued, "because I was 19 when I created it in my grandmother's kitchen in Ohio, and at the time, I'd never even been on a plane. So please, tell me again, how did you manage to travel through time and space to steal my family's memories?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a career and a man's entire fraudulent identity imploding. The fallout was swift and brutal. An emergency board meeting was held the next morning. Julian, in a rumpled suit, sat in silence as the legal team presented a systematic deconstruction of his tenure, detailing not just the incident with the Thorns, but a clear, documented pattern of discriminatory behavior. Then, the situation escalated. A diner from the previous night, horrified by what they had witnessed, posted a video of the confrontation online. It went viral. Within hours, millions had watched Chef Julian Croft's sneering, contemptuous dismissal of the very people who owned the restaurant. The story was picked up by national news outlets. #Adurelia trended on social media. The Parkers, now facing a full-blown public relations crisis, held a press conference. But instead of deflecting, they took ownership. What happened at our restaurant was a failure of our leadership. Marcus stated, his voice firm. We are responsible, and we will fix it. Lena outlined their plan. A complete overhaul of company culture. Mandatory, rigorous anti-bias training for all 5,000 employees. A new, technologically advanced reservation system that eliminated subjective seating decisions. The creation of a new executive position, a Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, reporting directly to the board. For Julian, the consequences were absolute. He was terminated with cause. His name became a cautionary tale in the industry, a synonym for arrogance and prejudice. He disappeared from the world of fine dining, his reputation in ruins. But the story didn't end with his downfall. It ended with transformation. 1 year later, the Gilded Compass was thriving under new leadership. Executive Chef Leo, Julian's former sous chef. The kitchen staff was more diverse, the atmosphere more collaborative. The server, Alex, was now the general manager. The changes implemented by the Thorns had a ripple effect across the industry. Competing restaurant groups adopted similar reforms. Culinary schools integrated ethics and equitable hospitality into their core curriculum. The Aurelia Group, once on the verge of a brand catastrophe, was now celebrated as a leader in corporate responsibility and workplace equity. Their profits had never been higher. The incident, born of ugliness, had become a catalyst for profound, positive change. The Thorns proved that true hospitality wasn't about excluding people to create an elite atmosphere. It was about ensuring that every single person who walked through the door felt seen, respected, and truly welcome. They proved that dignity is the most valuable ingredient of all. True hospitality sees the human before the customer. Dignity isn't reserved for those who look the part. If you made it this far in our story, you've witnessed something powerful. A moment when justice was served not through revenge, but through accountability and transformation. I want to hear from you. Has someone ever made you feel unwelcome somewhere you had every right to be? How did you respond? Share your experience in the comments below, and please comment with respect. Your stories matter. If this video resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and empowerment. This isn't just an ending, it's a new beginning.